Howdy everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that's been on my mind for quite a while now, which is I'm going to be talking about the spreadsheetification of Yu-Gi-Oh decks and how I kind of just find combo decks these days mostly just boring to play. And there's a few key points I'm going to be going over as to why I think that. You know, you've probably noticed if you're a long-time viewer of the channel, my whole thing basically is just combo guides and combo theory crafting, things like that. So it's been something that I've enjoyed doing for the past few years or so, and it's been really nice and you guys seem to like it. You know, I just haven't been making a whole lot of videos about a lot of these newer decks coming out because kind of just play themselves to a degree, right? Like so many decks just ignore hand traps and have extremely linear one-card combos and extenders that do the exact same thing as a starter and just extremely bloated card effects on these combo decks now. And I'm going to give a few different examples about why and kind of compare it to some of the older combo decks that we've talked about in the past. What that means for the future of this channel is that I'm bored of doing combos. Well, I don't know. I might just start doing some jank. Just start cooking up some jank combos instead of just coming up with a bunch of meta combos. So let's just go ahead and get into topic number 1 of this video, which is going to be the spreadsheetification and the linear style of newer decks nowadays. And that's not necessarily on the player's side, it's more on Konami's side, right? You know, everybody knows that you can find combo guides on YouTube, and if you're stupid, you'll pay $20 for a spreadsheet instead of just looking up somebody's video. But it's more of a Konami design issue, right? Like in the past, when Konami would reveal a new archetype, for example, it wasn't immediately clear what the combo lines were, right? You could see the potential for combos, but you actually had to sit down and lab things out, test out ratios, find certain tech cards to throw in there. But nowadays, and I noticed this with Ryziel, I noticed it with Malice, you know, even dog shit decks like Ryuga. Just a few days ago, Yummy got revealed, and you read all those cards for the first time, and then like you can just see the combos in your head already as you're reading the cards. And as somebody that likes to sit down and lab things out and try to be creative, you know, you read the cards and you just already know what to do. And sure, you can sit down and lab out combos through certain hand traps and things like that. But again, that goes back to the card design where every deck plays through 3 hand traps now, so who cares? And it kind of makes it boring to read new decks. Like, yeah, sure, they're fun to play, I'm sure, but I'm sure Yummy is going to be fun to play. Some people find Ryziel fun to play. Malice is fun to play. But from a theory perspective, and as somebody that likes to just lab out combos and try to come up with, you know, optimizations and optimal end boards, it can be a bit boring. And it really is just a Konami design issue. You know, there so many decks just have one-card combos these days, and then they have, you know, dedicated starters, dedicated extenders, you know, extra deck cards that just have way too many effects on them and go +4 as soon as they hit the board. You know, I think the only deck in recent memory where I read the cards for the first time and it wasn't just immediately clear what the combo lines were was a deck like Mermail, where you read the cards and you're like, yeah, these cards are powerful and they have a ton of combo potential, but what are you doing with them, right? Because you had to combine the old cards with the new cards and try to figure out what the best lines were, what the best end boards were. And I think that's really the last time that I kind of had fun just sitting down and going through combos was Mermail. Because every other deck, you read it for the first time and you're like, alright, I know what to do. You just off the rip, you already know. Like Yummy, oh, you summon one guy, you link it off the link one, you search the field spell, Field Spell revives a guy, Synchro into this guy that searches 2 cards for some reason, and then, I mean, that's it. I mean, sure, you can probably do more, and I'm sure there's a lot of different variants, but you read the cards and you're like, okay, I get it. I know what to do. Oh, and by the way, it plays through like a bunch of hand traps while you're doing it, because it's just every card is a starter and an extender. And now that kind of transitions into my second point, which is just extremely bloated card design nowadays. Because we all remember the old Snake Eye days not too long ago, where you would imperm a Snake Eye Ash, and then they would play one of their other 12 cards in deck that do the exact same thing that Snake Eye Ash does, but, you know, summons from hand instead of having to be normal summoned. So one of the main reasons I find a lot of modern combo decks so boring is that they have like a linear path that they follow, right? So you have a Snake Eye Ash, you have some extremely optimized combo that you're trying to go for, right? So Snake Eye Ash does the full combo, you know, just follows the train tracks up. But oh, my Snake Eye Ash got negated, so I guess I'll play Diabellstar. And then now Diabellstar goes and follows the same exact path as the Snake Eye Ash. Or, oh, my Ash got negated, I guess I'll just Bonfire for Poplar. And now Poplar summons and then follows the exact same path that the Snake Eye Ash was going to take. Which is all amounts to adding the original Sinful Spoils, which on its own is kind of also an extender that follows the exact same path as these, given that you have any one of these other cards. You know, back in the day, you used to have to jump through hoops to be able to, you know, correct the course on a combo line through a hand trap, because decks used to have, you know, very noticeable choke points in them, right? But nowadays, decks don't have choke points, so you just have a starter and then an extender that does the exact same thing that the starter does. And like Ryzeal has this, Malice has this, Yubel has this, you know, even Mermail has this, right? Like if your starter gets negated, you just go Abyss Rhine into Coelacanth, and then, you know, you're just balling on your opponent because they wasted a hand trap, and now you still have full combo anyway. And there's no clear choke point on where to interrupt any of these decks. And the same is true for Blue Eyes, right? Because look at this, Blue Eyes, you have Maiden, Sage, and you have Primite guy, right? Now, these are all one-card starters, except Primite. Primite's not exactly a one-card starter, but it pairs extremely well with any of these other 3. You have optimal normal summons, and then you have cards that do the exact same thing as what your normal summon was going to do, right? So if you normal a Sage and it gets negated, it's like, okay, well, I have Maiden, so I'm just going to activate Maiden anyway. Or I have Wishes, so now I'm just going to discard a card and then search the Maiden, continue on your full combo. If they imperm this, which you should never imperm this, by the way, you should imperm the Link one. They link it off for the Link one, and then they get the field spell, and then you extra normal Sage, and then now Sage goes through the full line. So even if you disrupt the Primite engine, they still just pivot into the Blue Eyes engine. So it's the same kind of thing as Snake Eye, where, yeah, you have starter, but then you have extender and extender that do the exact same thing that the starter does. So hand traps aren't super impactful on decks like this anymore. You know, and Ryzeal is the same way, and Malice is the same way, where, yeah, your optimal normal summon is going to be Ice, but it doesn't have to be Ice, right? You can start with an X or a Sword, and it's just extremely bloated card design with no choke points is kind of my main concern, right? Because if you go back and look at older decks, like, well, I say older decks, but decks from like the Duelist Nexus era, like Infernoble and Manadium, right? Infernoble in Duelist Nexus, so this is before Diabellstar came out. The deck had a very clear choke point in Isolde, right? If your Isolde got impermed, then you now had to just scramble to find some sort of way to get into your Angelica. And there was no Angelica 2. And that's what made the deck so difficult to play, but also so fun to play, is because, yeah, you have some extremely powerful card, but it's also super vulnerable, and if it gets interrupted, you're now scrambling to find some way to continue playing. So that leads you to a couple of different options where you have to, find as many combo lines as possible to put up some kind of negate before you use Isolde, right? Some people use like Kashtira stuff with like Sublimation Knight to make a Barone, before you summon an Isolde. There was also combo lines where you could put up a Phoenix Gearfried and then still have a way to make an Isolde. You could beat both like Nib and Ashe and Valor. I mean, you still lost to Imperm, but, it is what it is. And even decks like Mannadium had clear choke points in cards like Lightheart, where they could have all the Mannadium cards they could ever want, but if you negate the Lightheart, they're completely cut off from the Scareclaw engine. And the Scareclaw engine, if you remember, just gives you a ridiculous amount of card advantage and synchro plays and link plays, right? It was crazy. So if you cut them off of the Scareclaw cards by negating the choke point with the Lightheart, their end board really isn't that good. And they have to find some way to extend further, and they have to deviate from the linear path, right? And that's why I find so many of these modern decks like Ryziel and Malice and even Blue Eyes can be kind of boring sometimes. It's because you never have to navigate through disruption in a certain way that deviates from the main combo line, right? Like everything just converges back to the main combo line instead of having to kind of zigzag around and eventually get to something that resembles an end board, And I'm not even going that far back in time here, right? I'm talking 2013, Mannadium, Unchained. Unchained was another really cool combo deck that was like super unintuitive, right? And it had so many different lines. And people found ways to put up a Caesar before the 5th summon, before they went into things like Yama, so that they could play around Nib and things like that. Too many decks now just play through disruption too well because card design is so bloated, and the combo lines are so set in stone, designed into the cards, that there's no incentive to really deviate from that path that the designers have laid out for the deck. And even going a bit further back in time, decks like Salamangreat and Marincess, back in the day. I mean, obviously Salad's gotten a ton of new support since then, but those decks had key points of interruption that you wanted to hand trap. Marincess Sea Angel is it's the only card that searches the field spell. So if your opponent ashes your Sea Angel or imperms, whatever, if it gets negated, it cuts you off the field spell. Now, what does cutting you off the field spell do? It makes it so that your Argonaut no longer has an equip to use its spell trap negate. It also means that using a Crystal Heart to make the Argonaut no longer makes it unaffected, so your cards are now weak to breakers. And then, Salad's kind of the same way. You cut them off of Sanctuary, and it gets rid of a lot of key effects from a lot of their link monsters, like Sunlight Wolf, being able to recur, traps that you send off of, Gazelle, things like that. And even going back a little bit more to some of the more degenerate days with like Halcyon combos, like you could let your opponent do their little 1-card combo, but if you imperm the Auroradon or Valor, whatever, I mean, they're just sitting on an Auroradon with nothing to do. And they already used their normal summon, usually. Some decks didn't use their normal summon, but most of them had some kind of normal summon. So you had to find ways to put up some form of interruption again, to protect your Auroradon. And some decks did this, like, 2020 Infernoble, where you would put up a Gearfried, use that to protect your Auroradon from Valor, or protect your Hulk from an Ash. And if they interrupted you before you put up the Gearfried, well, then they don't have interruption anymore for the Auroradon, right? A lot of combo decks in the past just had this like push-pull with your opponent, where they had to kind of decide where to use their hand traps efficiently. Like, do they want to negate your engine before you get to the choke point so that you don't set up a negate? Or do they have enough hand traps to be able to stop both your negate and your choke point in the combo? And nowadays, I just don't get that. I don't get that sense anymore, right? Like when you play Ryziel or Malice, you just let your opponent hand trap you, and then you just play some card that just goes through it because there's no clear choke point, and then just do the exact same thing you were already gonna do before you got hand trapped. And those are kind of the main talking points I wanted to go over, and why I really haven't been uploading. Because I kind of promised like a Blue Eyes combo video, but I started labbing the Blue Eyes combos, and I was like, man, these are all it's just the same combo every time. Like, sure, there's different variants you can play with, like Bestials, and certain builds play the Flameveil Guard as a one-star tuner to summon from deck off like Primite stuff. But at the end of the day, if you can't read these cards and figure out the combo lines just by reading them like a single time, like, I don't know what to tell you, man. It's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. You don't have to be a genius to know how to summon Sage, search Maiden, activate Maiden, grab True Light, search Wishes, add literally the rest of the deck. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. So, I don't know. This video might have been kind of all over the place, but basically my main points, just to recap, combo decks these days are kind of boring because they really don't open up opportunities to deviate from what the designers intended the cards to be used for. Which you could argue that as a good thing, right? Decks not being able to extend past what their intended limits are is probably a good thing for just kind of lowering the ceiling of the game. So I can kind of understand that, but I would like to see a bit more diversity in some of these decks. And putting restrictions on certain decks and certain archetypes can be a good thing, because it kind of makes it so that you can't just throw a bunch of degenerate engines in the deck, which unfortunately they failed to do with Fiendsmith. But I would like to see a bit more build variety out of some of these newer decks, and a lot of inboard variety, because a lot of the combos are just spreadsheeted at Konami headquarters, and then they just design decks based around some internal combo spreadsheet that they have. And I would like to see kind of the return of key choke points in combo decks, because that's really where players have to get creative with how they do their combos, right? Can I put up some kind of way to protect my choke point? Am I going to play specific cards to protect my choke point, like, Forbidden Lance to dodge Imperm, random things like that. Not Hornet Drones, what's the other one? Eagle Booster. I used to play Eagle Booster in like some Sky Striker Infernoble decks that I could Eagle Booster my Isolde. That was fun. Watching my Isolde get Impermed, and then I Eagle Boostered, and then I went full combo. And I would also just like to see this bullshit with like every single deck now has 5 starters and 5 extenders, and every single card has the exact same effect, except one of them triggers on normal summon, and one of them triggers on special summon, and then one of them triggers when it's added from deck to hand to special summon, and then you have some extra deck monster that just, draws you 10 million cards and searches 10 million cards. I don't know. I'd like to see just some sort of change in that formula, because like I read Yummy for the first time, and I was like, bro, this is just Ryziel 2, but with food cats. Like every single card read exactly like a Ryzeal card. And Ryzeal is by far the best deck in the game right now. And if they just keep making decks like that, sure, everything's going to be a similar power level, but, you know, but then they make decks that I think are fun, like Materiactor. Like, I've been trying to cook up some Materiactor deck, and the card quality is just not on par with anything else. That's kind of why I just haven't been making combo guides lately, is because too many decks just play themselves and are extremely linear. Yeah, you can add a little bit of spice to it, but you can't add too much spice or else you'll just make your deck brickier. And if you make your deck brickier, it means you have less room for non-engine. And if you have less room for non-engine, your opponent's going to completely blow you out with their combo deck that is more consistent. So that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of, you know, combo decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! And the state of the channel overall. But if you made it to the end of this video, you know, maybe you put it on in the background or something while you were doing something else. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, because I kind of want to get other people's opinion on it, because obviously I'm like the combo guy. My entire channel for years now has been combo guides. You know, I like labbing decks. It's something that's really fun for me, is to sit down and just pick a deck and then just see what I can do with it. See what kind of crazy stuff I can do with it. How I can optimize combos and, you know, play through hand traps and things like that. That's something I really like doing. But decks just do that straight out the box now. There's really no room for improvement. You know, Konami makes a deck super strong with bloated effects, and then it kind of just plays itself. But I guess that's just kind of how they want to design things now. Alright, I rambled too much. Let me know what you think about the state of combo decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Down below, and bye-bye.